Hi, and welcome to Hiss and Tell, a cat behavior and more podcast. I'm your host, Christina Wilson, animal behaviorist. Today is part 2 of our episode about feline nutrition, and I'll be speaking with Dr. Gina Rendon and Dr. Nancarrow again. We're covering raw food, sanitation, pathogens, allergies, special diets, and answering your listener questions. So join us as we talk all about feline nutrition. Okay, so now I think we're going to segue into talking about raw food. I know this is our hot button topic. People are really either super pro raw food / cooking for their cats or really actively against it. Let's get into it.
Yes.
Let's go. Let's fight.
This is where all the emotions come in. Yes. People feel very, very strongly.
Yeah. So I guess let's just start with both of you can say, where do you fall on the spectrum of, do we feed cats raw food? Is it helpful? What are the benefits? What are your feelings about raw food? And then we'll go from there if everyone is still talking to one another after this introduction.
I'll start because I'm on the con side. I don't recommend it. And I'll just, for one thing, I'd like to make clear that we don't carry prescription diets or diets at my hospital. So I don't make any money from commercial diets. I think we have just a few bags of food for dogs that have diarrhea to send them home so that they don't have to order them online. But other than that, we're not carrying any diet. So I'm not getting any money for any of this. Raw diets, and the other part that I'd like to clarify is that, it really is up to the owner. Or I guess we're not supposed to say owner anymore. We're supposed to say guardian. It's really up to the guardian to make the final decision. All I can do is offer advice and offer my expertise. But in the end, I'm never going to shame anybody for what they want to feed their animals. And so, this is just my take on things. But my biggest concern is just bacterial pathogens. And just, I always feel like, on the human side, there are so many recalls. There's issues with salmonella. There's issues with listeria, E. coli. You go to the restaurants now and they say, at the bottom of the menu, there may be raw food. You eat at your own risk. If you're ordering like a hamburger that's medium rare or whatever, that there are risks for that. And this is on the human side where there is a lot more oversight. I mean, I think there's oversight on both sides, but with raw food, pet foods, there's not better management of that. There's not higher vigilance on that side. And so there's always going to be the risk. I went to a lecture recently just on bacteria in general, like emerging pathogens. And, one of the big concerns is that a lot of raw foods have Enterobacter species that are resistant to antibiotics. And so, and they're not necessarily pathogenic if an animal ingests them, but those bacteria are in the environment and we're exposed to those. And they have that, the encoding for antibiotic resistance that can jump over to other bacteria. And so, I think because antibiotic resistance is such a big deal, it's such a big health issue that's a really big concern. People don't even necessarily wash their pets' dishes. There was a study that about 12% of pet owners, when questioned, actually wash their pets' dishes every day, which I think is crazy. And so just in terms of food safety, if they're not washing their dishes, I'm not confident that they're also managing raw food in a way that is necessarily healthy. And so especially pregnant women, people who have compromised conditions, should really not be feeding raw food diets. There's it's the Companion Animal Parasite Council. They basically recommend against kissing your dog if they're on a raw food diet. I think Lee, you and I had talked about Colorado State and all of the measures that they take with animals that are on raw food diets. So I personally, just safety-wise, don't recommend them. And it's all really about safety and also now this emerging antibiotic resistance issue. So,
can we, for 1 minute, talk about why it is so important for people to wash their pets' dishes, to me that study number is absolutely alarming and bonkers. And I wish that there was concurrent data on how many of those pets had just crazy acne. Because I think also something that people don't know that much about is how much food bowl cleanliness and food bowl type contributes to pet acne, and even what pet acne is. And so maybe just briefly, and I'm sorry, I know I'm interrupting the hot button topic, but this is something I run into with my clients and friends a lot, who are like, oh, what's this on my animal's face? And then I ask them about the dish and they don't know. So maybe you can talk just briefly about why is it a good idea to wash your pet's dish every day like we wash our own dishes?
I think you just clearly stated it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm a vet now. Yeah.
Bacteria. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually kind of shocking to me, because I've made it a point, especially if there's like an issue with recurring diarrhea, if there's an issue with acne, I'll ask people, like, are you washing the dish every day? And they generally don't. It's pretty interesting.
I mean, and again, we're not like a banner household, and it's hard managing for 11 cats, but we switch them for every meal, right?
Yeah,
just
I do too.
Because the growing, like what they're eating, just like soft meat.
Yeah.
Like an idea that especially in the summer, it's just sitting there festering.
Yeah.
The idea is abhorrent to me, just on a personal level. I'm like, that cannot, that's disgusting. I'm sure they would happily eat out of them for a day, but like, no. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, I totally interrupted the raw food discussion. Dr. Nancarrow, do you want to go ahead and give your side of the raw
Actually, Gina, I think Gina and I are very close.
Oh, good.
I don't shame, you mentioned this, Gina, I don't shame any clients if they want to feed raw, but I stress upon them, I would rather it be a commercially made and not homemade and AAFCO approved.
Sure.
My biggest concern, whether they cook, it's the homemade diets, because they're not AAFCO approved. Even if you get a nutritionist to give you the recipe, I did this for one of my dogs for, I don't know, 4 months. I tried to do homemade diets, and it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, and I remember I'm like, I don't have the blueberries this week, I just won't use them, and it just puts you on a cycle that you're missing ingredients, and so you're not feeding a well-balanced diet. And then one weekend I made a pot, you have to get the hearts and the chicken livers and the gizzards and all these ingredients, and I made a pot in the crock pot, and I could smell bacteria.
Ugh.
And I had to throw the whole thing away.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, I'm never doing this again. Waste all that money, waste all that time. It just wasn't worth it. And it was a very good learning experience for me, because I can tell my clients, I'm not a fan of homemade diet. I don't care if you cook it, if it's raw, I don't care. I'm not a fan. As far as, going back to the raw, so people who still eat meat, I'm one of those, we know how to, my husband and I have our own chopping board for the chicken or the pork. We have a knife. We know to clean that area. We know to clean the sink before we introduce anything else. We we know that. We've learned how to keep our kitchen clean from those pathogens that come in with our raw meat. So it makes sense that clients should be able to do that too. But I don't think they do, because they don't wash their animals' dishes, right? So that is a concern. I do want to throw in a caveat that if you go on the CDC website and look for recalls of pet food for food pathogens, dry food is listed a lot more commonly than raw. And you might say, well, that's because there's a lot more dry food out on the market than raw, and fair statement. But I think there are ways of getting away around the fear of the pathogens, because we do it every day with our own food.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
I think one of the things we should also probably just quickly hit on is because not everybody, I think, knows why there is this push for raw food, and probably just stating why people want to do raw food, it would be helpful for, to the general listener. And I think, there is the claim that it's closer to a wild type diet, animals that are out there, cats that are hunting, and so raw food is closer to that. I think, obviously the difference is that it's not fresh, it's not a freshly killed creature, which is very different from an animal that has been killed and then frozen. And I think there are some studies out there that show that there may be some benefits to the raw, but it's not conclusive.
I think one of it is because they do want to get closer to nature. They want to get away from the processed foods. If you talk to our colleagues that have taken the route of holistic or integrative medicine, most of them are promoting raw food, and I think they're finding much healthier skin coats, fewer allergies. I don't know what they're seeing more of than we do, or the general conventionally practicing veterinarian, but I just don't want to say that raw is bad. I think we need to open that box.
Like to. There are definitely animals that have had issues with, and usually it's skin allergies, that have gone to raw diets and have been maintained. Their skin is maintained with the raw diet. So it's not like I don't see that.
Right.
And again, I feel like in the end, it is that the guardian's choice. But if it is working, then they have to be really careful about, the handling. So yeah.
And those pathogens that are potentially in the meat or on the kibble are more of a problem for us humans than our pets.
Yeah.
Our pets
That's
have
absolutely
really
right.
high acid in their stomachs that kill those microorganisms, but we don't. So it's more of a threat to us. And I don't think people understand that.
Yeah,
I
think
that's a good point.
That idea being in the popular culture is one reason that people are lazy about washing bowls. Is that people have this idea, and correctly so in many cases, that animals have stronger stomachs, they can eat raw food, they can eat just animals they've killed, they can eat trash. We don't have to be as worried about their cleanliness, right, or necessarily like the state of their bowl. So I feel like that's one kind of reason for that. And then one thing about the raw food that I have noticed with my clients, and just being in a lot of cat Facebook groups where people talk about all of these issues, is there's a lot of just general discussion about, this raw food diet made my cat's poop stop smelling. It seems to solve in quote air quotes for people who are just listening. The perception is that it solves a lot of human-based problems around cats, such as stinky poop. Shedding, people are making claims that it's really drastically reduced shedding, that it has improved behavior, that it has done all of these things that I don't know if there have really been any actual studies on any of these things, but there's so much talk in these cat groups where people who love cats and have a lot of cats go and talk with other like-minded people, and they share this information, that now there's this generalized understanding among lay people that raw food solves X, Y, and Z.
I've heard it both ways. I've had people who feed raw food diets that say the animal's poop is horrible, and then they switch it over. So it's gone in both directions. Some people will say the raw food improves one thing and doesn't improve another thing. So I think it really is also that animals are very individual.
Correct.
So it kind of depends on what their genetics are and how they process things. But
Sure.
I think that the jury is still out about whether raw food diets are that much better. And again, for me, the issue is mostly just safety.
Right. And is there a concern for humans handling the raw food
Absolutely.
to give to their pets, right? So
Yes,
because
that's the main concern.
Right, about pathogens like salmonella or E. coli, like then would you recommend that if obviously humans are going to feed their pets humans, if lizards are going to feed their pets a raw diet, why I said humans like a total moron. If people are feeding their pets or their cats a raw diet, should people be wearing gloves while they're handling the food or doling the food out, right? Is something else I think that people are not maybe really thinking about, that this is something that you should be gloved for.
I think
But
probably...
again, when I'm preparing my chicken for myself, I don't wear gloves. I take my rings off.
Right, but you probably
do
wash
have
your
dedicated,
hands.
I wash my hands.
And you have
Absolutely.
dedicated equipment, and I think that's probably the most important thing, is making sure that you have dedicated cutting boards, whatever that is, and then washing your hands.
Yeah. I
Maybe
think a lot of
doing
people
light bleaching.
Yeah, I think a lot of people maybe wouldn't immediately think to wash their hands after handling cat food.
Right. Even though they should.
Just because it's stinky, number one.
Yeah.
But I just think it's not something that people would immediately think of, whereas if they're handling raw chicken, my hope is that most people would immediately wash their hands.
Yeah.
Or they're going to maybe be removed from the gene pool fairly quickly if they don't. So, anyhow. Have either of you read anything about a raw food diet doing anything one way or the other for cats' dental health?
I read a little bit about it, so the theory is that animals that are eating the bones, that the bones are what can keep teeth cleaner. But if you look at animals, like feral animals that are catching wild things, or I think they even looked at like cougars and things like that, and comparing dental health, I mean, cats are going to have dental health issues, whatever they're eating. But I think one of the risks, the higher risk factors with raw diets, is broken teeth. And so they find that in the wild. They find that, I see that all the time with dogs that chew on bones, that they'll break teeth. And so, and I think a lot of the disease that animals will get tends to be more under the gum line. And it's kind of like Lee said, we're brushing our teeth twice a day, and we're still going to the dentist, every 6 months. I think dental health is just, there's not an easy answer for dental health. There's nothing that's magical that's going to make any animal, any creature's teeth healthy just because they're eating that. I think it's just bacteria, genetics. There's a lot of different factors.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you monitor cats who may be on a raw food diet to see if they have any nutritional deficiencies or health issues? And then what would you do if you have a concern? I guess obviously go to your veterinarian. But what would you look for in a cat who's on a raw food diet?
I think, the concern, if it's not an AFCO approved diet, which is the American, oh God, I always forget what those initials stand for. The American Feed
Association of American Feed Control
Officers. Yeah. So that they're the ones that there should be their stamp on the food, and that says if they meet the nutritional requirements. But so if somebody is just sourcing raw rabbits or whatever from their butcher and feeding them to their animals, my concern would be issues. I think there's like a vitamin D. There are vitamin D problems. I mean, if you're not giving the bones, it's really hard because sometimes you don't know there's an issue until it's too late. You don't know if there's like a vitamin D deficiency, which will cause a calcium issue. I read a case study about a cat it was a kitten actually, who wouldn't eat any commercial diet, wouldn't eat any wet food, the only thing it would eat was a raw food diet. And I guess it was just the meat, the owners were feeding the meat, and this poor little kitten developed secondary hypoparathyroidism, so it had a vitamin D deficiency and developed rickets. And so, and it was because they weren't supplementing it with essential vitamins and minerals. And so, and of course the cat was like, I am not eating anything except this. But they did finally realize that they needed to supplement. And so they finally supplemented and the cat did okay. But so that's the big concern about if it's not formulated, that they're not getting all of their essential vitamins and minerals, and they can develop things like rickets. What is the other major deficiency? Taurine. I guess with raw food diets that's less of an issue, but but that would be one of them. So just making sure that they're getting, I think there are some fatty acids that they don't get from just a meat diet, but
Are there any cats who, and again, I know where you guys stand here, but are there any cats who would just not be suitable candidates for a raw food diet? Like if they have compromised immune systems or specific health conditions, are there any cats that you would just be like, absolutely no, do not do this?
I think that's actually a really good question, because I think for me it really is like, what will this animal eat? So again, cats are so individual, and if it's the only thing that they're going to eat, I'm not going to say no to it.
Right.
I would rather a cat take in calories than not take in calories. And so, especially the cats that tend to be the ones that are wasting and not eating, feed them what they'll eat. So,
yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that's so true with our kidney cats or cats with chronic kidney disease. We put them on a kidney diet and they won't eat it. I'm like, well, just I don't care. Get them eating.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
And that's always the main thing, that if they'll eat it, great. If they won't, don't worry about it.
Exactly.
This is not a priority.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we covered raw food very well and without any blows. So that's good, even though the software did try to mute you several times, Gina. So I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, just say absolutely shut up. So do you want to talk a little bit, Dr. Nancarrow, about what diet you do advocate for? Because I don't think we've actually really talked about it.
Yeah.
We've talked about what you don't really necessarily advocate for, but what do you recommend?
Right. So it kind of depends on what the client wants. Is the client, they're economically strapped and they want a less expensive food, then I'll probably recommend. I hate naming. Can we name names?
I know. I don't like naming names either.
You can, but I don't know if you want to. I mean,
just say commercial.
Okay. All right. I would direct them towards commercial food, dry and canned, high protein, low carb, as much as you can. And I would encourage them to look at the dry matter, because you're supposed to compare foods by the dry matter, because kibble is about 7 to 10% moisture, and canned food is about 67 to 70% moisture. And so that moisture content can skew that comparison. So they recommend comparing foods by the dry matter basis. But it would be high protein.
So I know we talked about that, Dr. Nancarrow, that you tried cooking for your pets. I know you said for dogs. Would you advocate that probably not then, that people try cooking for their cats? Where do you guys both fall on the spectrum of somebody, let's say someone's just gotten a cat and they're like, what should I do that will be the absolute best thing for this cat? What would you tell them? Maybe it is. Maybe it's that question.
I am leaning towards the human grade, gently cooked frozen food. It's AFCO approved. It's not homemade, so it's pretty convenient.
Right.
There's no preservatives. It's preserved by freezing, and they tend to really like it. But if you've got a cat that's on kibble and you're trying to switch, that's not going to be an easy switch.
Yeah.
And
I have a question for you, Lee.
Sure.
For me, with kittens, and so cats have the different life stages. There's growth, which is usually until about 6 months to a year for cats. And then there's mature, which is anytime after that. There actually isn't there's not a difference between, or a specific change in the nutrients for mature versus geriatric. But then there's also gestational, which is the same as kitten food. But so for kittens, I generally recommend dry food all the time, but making sure that they're getting meals of wet food and that they're eating wet food. And the reason that I do is because kittens are so metabolically active. They are burning calories like the house is on fire. They're so active. And when I've had clients that will only feed wet foods to their kittens, it's exactly what you were talking about, Christina. You'll have kittens launching themselves into to the plates of the person who's eating because they're so hungry. And so I always just recommend have the dry food out all the time, let them eat that. As they get closer to 6 to 8 months, then start weaning them off of the dry food, and then a wet food only diet. That's generally my recommendation. I don't know if you.
I mean, 95% of our clients feed dry and canned, a mix of both. But ideally, I'd like to move them a little bit farther on that spectrum. The one thing there is no uniform definition of a senior diet. However, I believe that they need more protein, and that's just my personal opinion. Because all these cats, as they start getting older, they are wasting their muscle. And I know in human medicine, as we get older, our protein needs go up to maintain our muscle mass. And that's extremely important. So the senior diets that are out on the market that are sold, those are based on individual companies, whatever they want to do. They just make it up. And a lot of them decrease the protein. So I tell clients, don't switch your cat to a senior diet, because it doesn't mean anything. It's just a marketing ploy from that food company. And they just
what are you recommending for cats with kidney disease? Because those tend to be the older animals. And I agree with you, definitely. I mean, there are studies that cats lose protein at a much higher rate than dogs or humans as they age. And so I agree. I think protein is so important.
Yeah. No, now for the kidney cats, that's a different story. Okay. I try to get them on a kidney diet. I try to restrict their phosphorus. If their phosphorus is high, I'll add a phosphate binder. I went to a CE meeting. It's probably been 4 or 5 years ago now. They said that to keep those cats eating, you've got to keep their phosphorus low.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's an excellent point, because those cats that won't convert to a prescription renal diet, if they're eating just a regular maintenance diet, because that's all they'll eat, you can still do a phosphate binder. So it's not like you don't have options there. So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, those kidney cats, I just want them eating.
Exactly. Please eat. Yes. And stay hydrated. Drink. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's the end of our raw food questions.
That wasn't so painful.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the bloodbath that we were anticipating. Good job, everybody.
Well, wait till we hit the comments, right?
I know. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. There may be a lot of angry people. We'll see. Hopefully not.
We'll see.
Okay. So now we're just going to get into the questions from listeners. I do think we've answered many of these already in our discussion. But the first one is canned tuna safe for cats? I know there, at least in our household, and Gina knows we lost a cat to SCC, and my wife went down a real rabbit hole of, did we cause this because we occasionally gave them canned tuna, and there are some studies about, especially canned foods and, possibly carcinogens leading to uptick in oral cancers. I don't know if that is what this listener was asking about, or if they're just asking about tuna in general, but perhaps you could speak to both of those issues.
I think canned tuna occasionally, okay. I worry about the heavy metals and the mercury level in the tuna. I would say try sardines instead, because they're loaded with really good omega-3s and tend not to have the heavy metals.
Okay.
As far as carcinogen, I can't answer that part of the question.
I would agree. Tuna as treats, and we were talking about making tuna broth.
Yeah,
I think is totally fine. It's not a balanced diet. So if you're just feeding tuna, it's not. It doesn't have everything in it that a cat's going to need, and so it's not healthy on its own. So yeah.
Well, what do you feel about, and maybe you don't know anything, maybe this was just Allie's crazy research, but do you know anything about the canned foods?
The carcinogen issue? I think what I know is that everybody blames themselves when their animal gets cancer. And I think it's so common for me to hear people trying to figure out what they did that their animal now has cancer. I can't even tell you how many times I hear that. And so I think it's just a natural process of grief. Personally, I think that we are inundated with carcinogens, and I think that our animals are, they're sentinel creatures to some degree.
Yeah.
They are so in the ground. They're sniffing everything. They're taking everything in. They're small, and so they metabolize whatever carcinogens are out there. And it's it's one of the reasons why it's the leading cause of death in both cats and dogs as they get older. So, no, I don't think there's anything specific anybody is doing to give their animals cancer. It's just out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's our artificial world, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Completely agree with you, Gina.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I swear I didn't write that question. It's just like anecdotally relevant to us. Are churros the ultimate junk food for cats? Is it okay to give them daily? And for people who may not know, churros are little tubes of cat crack, essentially. I love them for training. I love them as super high value reinforcers of positive reinforcement. They're just tubes of happiness for cats, but I don't even know what's in them.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Goo?
Yeah. Goo.
We use them in the office while we're
We
giving
do
vaccines to cats.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
They're
it
amazing.
doesn't work on every cat, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah.
Anything that says on the label meant for supplemental feeding is not meant to be. That's a treat.
Right.
Exactly.
Right? And a treat should only be 10% of the calories for the day.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Well said.
What are some good treats? My cat no longer seems to tolerate the treats I used to give, greenies or free-dried chicken or instinct raw bites.
Churros are good treats.
Yes, that's, yeah.
Whatever they'll eat is a treat. Sometimes, their own food can be a treat. It really depends. Depends on the kitty.
I'm a big fan of using little pieces of kibble as in behavior work as the reinforcer rather than using treats all the time. You can just give little pieces of food rather than, like, especially if you're working with a cat who may be a little bit on the chunkier side and you don't want to constantly be giving them calorically high snacks. Dry kibble can really work. Also, our cats really love minnows, like freeze-dried. Like, it's not only chicken that's freeze-dried, and the freeze-dried fish, absolutely disgusting. Like, really, that smell will just hit you when you open the bag. But they are obsessed with the minnows, like obsessed. So that would be something I would try. Those seem to be popular.
yeah, I think staying on, again, the protein side, freeze-dried meats, organ meats, stuff like that, as opposed to carb kibble.
Yeah.
I mean, the kibble food is fine because that's part of their diet.
Are there any kind of dietary supplements that are good for cats with kidney issues?
Water. No, they're not. There are those supplements, like Azodial is something that's on the market, which is it's something that's supposed to be a waist trapper, and that's considered a nutritional supplement. But there aren't really many studies that show that those really help, and so most of the specialists don't recommend them. I don't think they hurt, but there's not really a specific supplementation that you should be doing other than making sure your cat is eating and making sure that they're staying hydrated for kitty cats.
Okay. I think we already answered this, but is a dry food only diet bad? My cat gets crazily food fixated with wet food, free feeding dry at the moment.
If your cat likes wet food, I would switch to wet food.
Absolutely.
Because the dry food, I still think we've discussed, it's too high in carbohydrates. And also the cats that are strictly on dry food tend to be overweight.
Yeah, and I would want more information about what does crazily food fixated mean? And,
That's a good,
what can we do to modify that behaviorally, whether we need to give them a go-to spot, whether we need to do some clicker training for that, like what can, given more information, what can we do to kind of modify crazily fixated, whether it's doling out more small meals, whether it's having sometimes even more predictable, maybe they're not that predictable in the house, so the cat is like super excited whenever the food comes out. There may be something that's a behavioral driver rather than it's the food that is the problem. And free feeding means the food's out all the time, so there's no fixation, right? So I would want to hear a little bit more about what is the schedule and what's going on exactly before deciding that this is what's happening. And again, I think what food is good. Somebody wanted to know, is it okay to give my cat raw quail eggs? I don't know. Maybe they have quails. I don't know. A surplus of quail eggs.
I think like any
that.
raw egg, there's that risk for salmonella. So
Right.
birds carry salmonella as a natural part of their flora, and it can be pathogenic to humans. So I think that would be my main concern is, are you frying up your little quail egg and then putting it on the food?
She said raw.
Raw. Oh yeah. Okay.
Raw. It's
yeah.
raw.
Now,
So no.
I would say no.
Okay.
I would say be careful.
Yeah. Okay. If you have local raccoons, you could give the raccoons your surplus quail eggs. Raccoons love even rotten eggs. That's what we do with our eggs. Is just throw them into the forest, and I've got cameras, and the raccoons love them. So give them to your local raccoons.
Oh, so nasty.
They will be very happy. They've got an amazing technique for eating eggs where they just like tap them and then bite the top off in this like perfect. They've really got it down. It's like they went to egg opening class and then they just like shoot the egg.
Like an oyster?
Yeah, it's so amazing. And then they leave these like perfect little egg cups lying around, and you're just like, how do you guys all know how to do this? It's so good, like so delicate and like perfectly done every time. Like, wow, you guys.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure everyone wants to know about raccoon techniques for opening eggs. Do you have any tips for cats that eat hydrolyzed food and react to anything non-hydrolyzed?
So we talked about hydrolyzed foods early in the podcast, but if you do have one of those cats that actually benefits from being on a hydrolyzed diet, which can be because of chronic GI issues or because of skin issues, my recommendation is to introduce one food item per week. So if you want to test to see, like, is this my cat reactive to beef? You can maybe add a little bit of beef to the diet and see, do those symptoms that they had before, do they react to them? If they don't have any reaction, then that could potentially be, something that you could switch over to a diet that has like a limited ingredient beef diet. If they're doing well on the hydrolyzed diet, then I don't see really a reason to change. It kind of depends on, what's going on.
Okay. All right. Well, that was the last question.
Wow.
We did it.
Woo!
Yay!
That wasn't so bad.
We all survived. So I really want to thank you both. Thank you to Gina and Lee for joining me on this talk about cat nutrition, and we all survived.
We did.
Nobody killed each other. I shout out to us, and thank you to our listeners for being so involved and having so many questions and being so interested on, having great nutrition for their cats. So thank you both for being here and for your wisdom and for caring about cats.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right.
Yes,
Yay.
thank you. It was fun.
Okay.
That was fun.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode or any of the episodes, please like and give us a rating. Also, feel free to share with your friends. We'd super appreciate it if you shared on social media or really anywhere. For cat behavior consultations, go to catitude-adjustment.com. You can follow us on social media at Hiss and Tell Podcast. Music provided by Cat Beats.